Hello and welcome back to this tutorial. In our previous tutorial, we were able to work with our text file with our file handling concept. So in this video, we are going to be working with CSV file. So what is a CSV file? Well, CSV means comma separated value. So the CSV file format and the JSON file format are one of the major files that are used in programming to store data. Okay, so if you want to work with CSV file in Python, you have to import it. So I'm just going to import it at the top. So I'm going to write import CSV. So now we have the CSV module in this file. And well, in our previous lessons, we were able to work with files by creating variables. So now we are going to move on to the more standard ways of working with files. And that is by calling the with statement on it. So I'm going to say with open. So instead of this writing file equals to open, so I'm just going to say with open. And like we did before, we are going to write in the file name. So I'm going to just call it new CSV. It's a new.csv. And in the mood that we want it, so I'm going to say the mood is going to be right. So, and when you're using this with function, the next thing you're going to pass in is as keyword, and the next thing you're going to pass in is the variable that you want to save that file as. So like here we have the variable name is file. So here I might just decide to save it as f, or as file, or as documents, anything you want to save it. So here we are going to add our colon. And remember, our steps are when you open the file, then you're going to call the next method that will perform the next operation you want on that file. So the next operation I want to perform on this doc file, right? Because remember, our file name here now is doc, not file. So the next operation that I want to perform is to write the file. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to call the write function. So I'm going to say, well, remember that when you're writing a block of code, you always remember to indent it. So I'm going to create another variable here. So, and I'm going to call it writer or write or anything. So I'm going to pass in the CSV method, and that method is csv.writer. Okay, and I will pass in the file name that I want to write. So the file name is doc, and the next thing I'm going to do is to tell Python the data that I want to pass into that CSV. Okay, so and that function, I'm going to call it on this write variable. So, and I'm going to say write dot write rows. So now there are two methods here. One is write row, another one is write rows. So when you're writing just one row, you can decide to use the write row, and when you're writing different rows, you are going to use the write rows. Okay, so now I'm going to write the rows. So, and what am I going to pass in into this write row? Now this CSV file format takes a list variable that is separated with comma. Okay, so it's going to take a list of items that is separated with comma. So I'm going to write in name, and I'm going to write in age, and I'm going to also write in maybe gender. So now we have this data that we want to pass into the CSV. Okay, so if we save this and run, so I'm going to close all of this for the test file, and I'm going to run this for our CSV file. And if we run this, we will see that a new CSV file has been created. So remember, we named this new.csv, and here we have just a CSV file that has one row. All right, so just have a usual CSV file that you can open with an Excel program. So I can come here. This is the file from outside the program, and if I open this, you see that we have just this one row, right? So we've been able to open this with Microsoft Excel, right? So now, what if I want to write in multiple items? So we already stated that we can pass in multiple items into the CSV file. So I can create a data. So I can decide to create a list of data that I want to write into the CSV file. So how am I going to achieve that? So I can create a data variable, and I'm going to set it to a list. But inside this list, I'm going to have another list, right? I'm going to have other lists. So I'm going to pass in this as my first row. So this list here is going to be my first row, right? So I'll pass it in. So the second list is going to be the second row. So this, I'm going to pass in another list, So the first row is going to be the header row, which is name, age, gender. So I can start having other items in that CSV file. So the name, I can pass in maybe a couple of names. So the first name, I'm going to write Fina, and I'm going to set the age of Fina to be 20, and then the gender should be female. All right. Then I can now separate this row with a comma, and I can decide to create another row. So Fina is one object that has a name, an age, and a gender. So the second person I can say is Peter, and I'm going to pass in the age of 25, and the gender is going to be male. Now, if we run this program, okay, we are having this because this file is open here. So I'm going to close this file, and now in this place that I have csv.write row, I'm going to change it to write rows, and I'm going to pass in that data variable that I created. So I'm going to pass in the data, and we are going to run this. So now we can view the CSV file. Now we see that a new data has been successfully inserted into this CSV file. And another thing we can do is that where we are opening the file, we can set a new line. We can decide to not want to have a new line. So we can change this variable and say new line equals nothing. So this is an empty string. So if we run this again, we see that we won't have that line that we had, right? So, and if we come back to open this, we should have a neatly formatted CSV file, right? So we can have this, we have this data here, right? So that is how you can create a CSV file with Python. So assuming we want to read the content of this CSV file, how are we going to achieve that? So I can decide to change what we already have here. So instead of this write mode, we can decide to use the read mode. So, and here I can change this csv.writer to csv.reader. All right. So, and I will change this to csv.reader. So remember that this is just a variable. So I can decide to change this to another variable. So I can call it read, and I will remove all of this. So if we run this, we're not going to see anything on the screen. So I will just run that. So nothing is happening. We are not getting the content of the CSV. But if you want to get the content of the CSV, we can decide to loop over the file. So we can write a for loop, and we say that for items, so remember that this item is just a variable that we are assigning to all the members of the iterable that we are looping over. So we can say that for items in read, that is after you read this, all the items that you read. So I'm going to write my in keyword, and I'm going to say read, and I'm going to write my colon. So I'm going to say print items. And by the time I run this, we should have the content of that CSV on the file. So we can see now that all of them are coming in as a list. Okay, so this is the way you can read and write CSV files. And remember that we have our modes. You can decide to play with the different modes: you read, write, and append. So assuming I want to append something else, I can decide to still append this data again so that it will repeat itself. So I can decide to append, and I will go with the write method. So I can say write is equal to csv dot write, and we pass in the document we are writing. So now I will now call the csv dot write row. So write dot write rows, and we pass in this data again. So by the time we run this, we are going to have a duplicate of that data in the file. So if we run this, we open the CSV file, we can see that this data has been appended. It did not overwrite what we had in it before. So I believe you understand how this file handling works. So now the file modes, the major ones are read, write, and append. You can also play with binary files. So assuming I'm working with a binary file, I can decide to RB, that is read binary, write binary. So but the major ones are read, write, and append. So depending on what else you want to do, you can decide to change the mode according to what you are trying to achieve. So thank you so much for watching this video. And in our next video, we are going to be working with dictionaries, how to write a dictionary object into a CSV file. Okay, so See you in the next video.